Hello, Grant, and good day.
Good day, Mason. How's it going?
I presume that this is partially why you chose Goodwood audio, because every day is a good day, and
Good day.
you know, wood is just one of the nature's oldest material. You know,
Exactly.
so
Exactly. You cracked the code. Few have done that, and you just happen to do that in 15
many have
seconds.
asked, but few have answered, right?
Exactly.
And as you can see, if you're a viewer today, we're down a chairman, Brian Omilion. Unfortunately, I think in the time that we've been doing these podcasts, I don't think he's ever been sick. So
he's got Omilion germs.
Finally got him. You know, yeah. So he is out today, and we wish him well and hope that he recovers and comes back even stronger than before.
Exactly.
Where he can turn out 8 pedal boards in a 7-day week, more than one a day. Because man, his output is impressive. I don't know that I have it. I don't have it in me.
Maybe it's a well-needed break. Maybe that's what it is.
Maybe his body's just telling him you need to take a break.
Yeah.
But I feel like today's topic is sort of interesting in that so often, not just in our industry, but in the world of entertainment, there is a strong pull for people to respond to things and analyze things in the moment that they're happening. And often that can create errors in judgment or knee-jerk reactions that maybe are not the most thoughtful. And so I think that we're doing our due diligence by having this conversation, sometime several weeks removed from the video that we're going to be sort of talking about and some of the findings around the video and this particular product. And if you haven't guessed it already, it's the Bad Monkey by Digitech, and Josh Scott, aka JHS Pedals, as it's known on YouTube, did a really interesting video where they not only talk about the history of the Bad Monkey and the naming and some of the other things associated, but also go as far to demonstrate it against some sort of gold standard pedals, being a Klon Centaur, a JHS Morning Glory, a Hermida Zen Drive, a Full Tone Full Drive, and a Noble's ODR1 among them. And the thing that was most remarkable, if you haven't watched it or seen any of the articles and publications and response videos, is that the pedals were seemingly identical when he was doing this comparison. And he was using a product that JHS makes where it's a switch box where you can sort of switch in and out 2 separate loops. So one that had the representative pedal, the Bad Monkey, and then had sort of the other having a revolving door of other products that were being switched in and out. And you can see the light turning back and forth, and the sound is almost indistinguishable between the two. So we're going to talk a little bit about maybe the efficacy of this experiment, and then maybe some shortcomings of this experiment, and also really curious, if you're watching on YouTube, about your thoughts on it, and maybe the varied response videos or articles that have ensued as a consequence of this. And I'm also just curious, not only from our perspective, but did it change your mind about overdrive pedals, and in particular the Bad Monkey? Maybe you've gone and tossed all your overdrives and you've got a bunch of Bad Monkeys, and you have every overdrive loop in your RGM switcher is just various Bad Monkeys at different settings. So Grant, before we dive in, any just initial thoughts, comments, things that you want to say about the video, sort of overarching big picture, before we get into some of the details?
I did watch the video, by the JHS video. I haven't watched a whole lot of follow-up, I have to say. So I don't have any
This may be good. This may be good because then your opinion will not be influenced by the responses.
But overall, I wasn't very surprised. mainly with the biggest reaction that it seems like people have is guitar players are dumb. I see that all over the place. Like Josh puts up this video of a $59 pedal, compares it to a $5,000 Klon, and now this $59 pedal is selling on Reverb anywhere from $200 to $1,100 because of this video and the perceived value. And I think that's the biggest thing. But I think the biggest thing that I would love to tackle at some point today is how not just guitar players, people in general buy with their eyes and not so much based on logic. And basically, because this pedal up until now was a $59 pedal, it was not good. How could a pedal that is $59 be any good? And I think that's one of the good things that came out of the video is you can't judge a pedal by its price, a book by its cover, or for me, a pedal by the graphics. Because the Bad Monkey pedal, it looks pretty horrible in my opinion, but maybe it doesn't sound that bad, and maybe that's not a bad thing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it and chatting through some of the pros and cons of the approach of JHS on this video.
Yeah, I'll say as a preface to this that I remember close to 20 years ago. And maybe not 20 years ago, but I'd say 15 years ago, that the Bad Monkey would come up periodically by people on the gear page. When the gear page was probably the foremost resource for guitar players before there was social media forums and Instagram and Facebook groups and stuff like that, where people would talk about this as a sleeper pedal alternative to a Klon or a lot of these sort of really boutique, sort of mid-gain, mid-range centric overdrives. So Josh certainly isn't the first person that has sort of posited that the Bad Monkey has some secret sauce and that is certainly a worthy sleeper. I think the other thing to name, and I think this goes slightly to the point that you made about buying pedals with your ears, not your eyes, and that cheaper pedals can be great. I think although the Bad Monkey, I would agree, sounds great, separately from the context that Josh used it in and in the context that he used it in, that doesn't necessarily translate to the quality of the pedal as far as how well it's built. So, some of the things that he compared it to, the Klon, his own Morning Glory, the Zen Drive, the Full Drive. I'm not going to put ODR 1 in this because I don't think that those are particularly well built, even though they sound great and are sort of cool sleeper pedals. All those other pedals, minus the ODR 1, are built way better than the Bad Monkey. So even if the Bad Monkey is working at the time that you get it, it is certainly built much more cheaply and built for a price point. And even when it was new, it didn't command a high value because it was built, I believe, in China and is, built to be a low cost alternative to something like a Tube Screamer. And in fact, that is sort of the basic archetype of that circuit, but also many boutique circuits. But I just wanted to name that. I think the thing for me, and I think maybe the first topic that maybe we talk about here, Grant, is what are the things that we think the video does really well in demonstrating or opening up for guitar players? What are the things that are enriching in a value that the video produces for somebody that is maybe really dogmatic about their overdrives or just the generalized findings of their video? What do you think are sort of like the big aha moments here?
I think the first thing I thought was interesting, which was good for me to watch actually, and probably took away a couple of my kind of biases with this stuff, is that he was testing against, originally a TS10 was the first pedal, and then he had the Klon, he had the Morning Glory Zen Drive ODR 1 and a Full Drive. He wasn't just shooting these out, Bad Monkey being a, Tube Screamer style circuit. He wasn't just shooting it out against Tube Screamer style circuits. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was like, man, he can, regardless of the settings of the pedals and if they were, where they were set, if they were in their sweet spot or not, he was able to make the Bad Monkey sound like a bunch of variations of different circuits. And if you would have told me about the test and I hadn't seen the video, like this is the premise for the JHS video, I was like, I don't think he's going to be able to get them all to sound that similar just because they're different circuit types. They're starting out with, the bass circuits being a different approach to the overdrive. And so it was cool for me to see that and be like, maybe some of these circuits, if you really try, maybe you can get them all to sound quite similar, whether or not it's sounding their best individually. I was surprised by how close they all were able to be tweaked. And so that was really good. The other thing that I really liked about this test, which I think is great for everybody, again, back to the point of buying with your ears, not your eyes, is the power of the A/B test, a live A/B test where you can essentially close your eyes and you can play back and forth and like, is the price tag really worth it or am I fooling myself? And really, I think the best way to do it is an A/B test or to listen to an album where someone is using a cheap pedal, in air quotes, like a pedal that shouldn't sound good. And you listen to that album and like, it actually, like, previous recordings Josh mentions in the video of people that have used it in the past. And so you can listen to it live and be like, they got it to sound incredible. Yeah. Why is a $59 pedal sounding so awesome? And then you can do the very cheap, affordable test of buying a $59 pedal, trying it yourself and seeing if you can, like you're saying, kind of, maybe replicate some of these same sounds and get it to sound great for really cheap. So I think I loved the A/B test. I love that he could show a variety of circuits in comparison to the Bad Monkey rather than tube screamers only, which a lot of shootouts would do. Same circuit, different box. Of course, they're all going to sound the same, but this was not that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the A/B test is really an underutilized way to just seek the truth on something sonically. And I think that I learned that, or it was validated again for me fairly recently when we did a video that compared a custom audio amplifiers OD100 to 3 amplifiers with which the channels in this channel switching amplifier were designed to emulate a Fender clean sound from a mid-60s, black panel Fender, a late 70s Marshall JMP, sort of a more aggressive, dirty rhythm, and then a higher gain Soldano SLO. And I put a splitter in front of them and recorded them simultaneously on each channel. And, there's a lot of people that proposed all these other amps in the commentary that could do the same thing, but had never done this test to them. And I've spent a lot of time when I'm, shooting out amps or voicing a pedal board or building a pedal board back when I used to do that more regularly, where I would record the pedal board, with and without the pedal board engaged to see how much degradation the sound would have relative to just going directly into the amp, and so essentially putting a whole pedal board into an A/B loop, similarly how Josh did a pedal, and then have the other side of the A/B loop just be the guitar straight into the amp without any pedal board. So you can really be clear about the level of difference between the thing that you're comparing and your bass line. And I think that that's one thing that I think is really refreshing about the way that this was done is the switching was done in real time. There wasn't any sort of delay in changing over so that you really get to hear what's going on through the same amp, through the same exact setting in real time. I think that that's really valuable. I think the other thing that's really valuable is I do think that it brought some people potentially back down to earth in terms of the value of some of these things. And as you said, and in fact, I think there's actually a video that was entitled "Guitar Players Are Stupid," that was sort of based around what was going on with the Bad Monkey in this video, and that people were now willing to pay these exorbitant sums because there was some sort of equality that was put between a Klassen and a Bad Monkey, for example. And the thing that I think which could be an extension of this, which I think could be equally true, is you could throw any number of overdrives into that spot and be able to get similar results based on, the way that if Josh's hypothesis is correct, that you could put anything in there or a lot of stuff in there and get some variation. It seemed like he stuck mostly with sort of mid-range focused kind of low to mid gain overdrives, so that they were kind of all in a similar food group. And, the degree to which that can be extrapolated to if you put a Marshall Governor in there, I don't know that would necessarily be one-to-one, but maybe in sort of a subcategory of, overdrive devices that have more of a mid-range emphasis, you may be able to sort of interchange those and get fairly similar results. And I think that would be true, again, of a lot of different circuits. Any other things that you think that this video did really well in sort of demystifying or validating or benefiting guitar players or the guitar community in general?
I just thought I had the one thing that JHS does really well is they take a topic like this, Bad Monkey shootout against X pedals, and they make it really fun. I was cracking up watching the video, and the monkey hands coming in and chucking throughout, they're just having such a great time doing it. And so it was really engaging while also causing you to stop and think, next time I'm going to buy a $700 overdrive, you're going to stop and think about it. Is it actually worth it? And I think the answer is probably no, it's not. I think you can get more creative with it. So I'm kind of repeating from previously, but I think those are kind of my key takeaways from it, from after I watched it. But please let me know if I'm missing anything here, Mason.
I agree completely. I agree. I think that the production value of this, although still sort of in the framework of how you might see a JHS video, they were able to adapt it with costume, with props. It doesn't seem as though they have access to ripe bananas. These were all yes, fairly unripe. It's one thing I noticed. Just an aside. Yep. So certainly they still needed a few more days on the vine to not be less plantain like and starchy and sweeter and softer bananas. But that's an aside. That's specific to me as a regular and frequent
You're not a green banana
of
guy.
Organic bananas.
Yep.
Primarily Ecuadorian bananas, I'll say. That's just where they happen to come from, where I buy bananas. I'll just say that if Ecuador wants to give us a sponsorship, we're open to that. I'm happy to be the organic banana spokesperson.
The poster boy. Yep.
I know that could sound bad in other contexts, but
it could.
Not here, though. With it.
This is a safe place.
Yes. Thank you, Grant. Thank you. But what I want to move into next is maybe some of the places where, and again, this isn't an attack on JHS. I think I speak for both of us when I say we have a high degree of respect for Josh and the YouTube channel and what it is that they're doing, but places where either maybe the narrative got a little bit hijacked through external sources, or things that the video does not claim and doesn't actually demonstrate, that I think is worth mentioning as far as sort of how much stock to put in all of the findings. But before I do that, I'd like to talk to you about a couple of sponsors that make the podcast possible every single week. The first of which is our friends over at the Guitar Sanctuary. And as Grant has said in previous episodes, Brian Omilion loves the Guitar Sanctuary so much, he's generally there every time that we record or shoot an episode. And in fact, the great Brian Omilion is actually housed inside of the Guitar Sanctuary and offers his pedalboard building services out of the Guitar Sanctuary. So if you're interested in having a pedalboard built, you can not only source all the materials that you need, whether it's from Vertex, whether it's from Goodwood, you can also have the entire rig put together right there at the Guitar Sanctuary from Brian Omilion. You can head over to theguitarsanctuary.com. You can see all the different pedal offerings that they have, and they do a great job at really having a variety of mid-range to high-end level guitars, amplifiers, and pedals, and really have everything that you could want, from high-end Fenders to Mesa Boogie to Suhr They really specialize in stuff that you really couldn't get anywhere else, and I certainly think it's one of the best shops in the country. Check out the guitarsanctuary.com. Check out their gear. Check out Brian Omilion inside of the Guitar Sanctuary. Very, very cool dealership based in McKinney, Texas. Secondly, our friends over at Sweetwater have a great new program called the Sweetwater Gear Exchange. And it's sort of a hybrid, in my mind, of Reverb and Craigslist. There's a peer-to-peer element that's very similar to the way that Craigslist dealings go, of course, without any of the weird stuff that can sometimes go on Craigslist. And it has all of the security and all of the organization that you would find on something like a Reverb or an eBay. And I really love the service here because not only is it very easy to find great deals on the gear that you want secondhand, but beyond that, you don't have to pay any seller fees if you decide that you want to put all of your earnings on a Sweetwater gift card. If you're somebody like me who's regularly buying things on Sweetwater, this is a great way to make sure that you don't have to pay percentages of your income from whatever you sold to the credit card companies or PayPal or whoever it is. You get to keep it all. You get to put it on a Sweetwater gift card and use it on stuff that you're going to be buying anyway so that you can maximize your profit. I really, really love this service. I've been buying and selling successfully on the Gear Exchange and have had nothing but great experiences. Check it out at sweetwater.com/used, and that's the Sweetwater Gear Exchange. Open an account now. It's free to do it and start buying and selling right away. And I think that you're going to love it as much as I do. Also, lastly, a third sponsor today that makes the podcast possible are our friends over at Stringjoy. I can't speak for Brian and Grant on this, but I am a string destroyer. I have very acidic hands and have always struggled with having guitar strings that last a prolonged amount of time. I'm typically a 1 gig and done, or a 3-hour practice session and done. The strings are destroyed, corroded, unusable from that point forward. And I've really struggled to find strings, coated or otherwise, that really sound good and also have longevity. And I have to say, I've been using some of the Stringjoy uncoated 10s on my Strats, which is primarily what I use. And for an uncoated string, I've never had anything that could last more than a week. And these not only last more than a week, they also sound amazing. And I can't wait to try their new coated strings that they're releasing, or that may already be out at this point, because I want to see how those compare to some of the coated strings that I've landed on previously from other manufacturers. Because, man, if they're anything like just these standard strings, I know that I'm going to love them, and I know that I'm going to love that longevity. And I just really love how they sound, how they play. And, you know, usually when you go to a coated string, it's always a compromise. The coolest thing about Stringjoy as well is they're offering a 10% off coupon for all of our listeners. Using the coupon code BOARDS, you get 10% off any of the strings that you want to try, whether that be regular strings or coated strings. And they also offer subscription services. So if you want to have strings delivered to your door in a predictable time frame so you never run out of strings, they also offer that service. So check out stringjoy.com and you can see all their offerings. You can check out their subscription service. It's all available over there. Get 10% off using the coupon code BOARDS, BOARDS. All right, Grant. So back to some of the shortcomings or things that maybe took away from the narrative of the actual video or sort of hijacked some of the findings. So a few things that I think are worth mentioning. And again, these are not necessarily things that were claims that were made in the video, but just things that I think are worth an acknowledgement. I think the first thing is that every overdrive pedal, at least in the ones that they used, which we've sort of already identified are not representative of all overdrives out there, but sort of more the low to mid-gain, mid-range based overdrives. They typically have a few settings that are sort of ideal for the way that they are to be used. For example, the Klon, and even Bill Finnegan would say this, the ideal way to use the Klon was typically at fairly low gain. Like I remember hearing from Mark Karen, who was the original demonstrator for the Klon at guitar shows back in the mid-90s, would say you point the gain knob at the LED and then you have your tone and your output to taste. So it was relatively low gain and kind of just like a slight gain boost and volume boost with some tone control. It was kind of the ideal setting of how to use the Centaur. I noticed in this particular video that it was set much higher gain, like 3/4 of the way up on the gain. I noticed on some of the other pedal settings that they were set to maybe non-optimal settings of the sort of revolving door of pedals relative to the Bad Monkey in order to sort of get equivalency. And so that tells me that it's not likely that the Bad Monkey is representative of those pedals at its best settings. So the Bad Monkey at its best settings is going to sound a particular way, which may be dissimilar from how the Full Drive and the TS10 and the ODR1 and the Klon might sound at their best optimal settings. However, if you manipulate them, you can get them to sound somewhat similar, even if they're not at their best. And I could tell that from some of the settings, from the pedals that I'm most familiar with, they didn't seem to be settings that I would even consider trying on them based on how I know them to sound best with most amplifiers. So I think that that's one thing to be named, is that maybe you can get a lot of different overdrives to sound similar, but you probably can't get them to sound as similar when you're setting them optimally for the thing that they do best. Any response to that, or did you have a similar thought?
Yeah, I would agree, firstly, that pedals typically have a sweet spot, and once you find it, you tend to not stray very far from it because you can never quite get it to sound as good as it is in the sweet spot in your rig. And that may vary slightly from rig to rig, taste to taste, but typically that would be the case. Feel free to disagree with me if you're listening. But the other thing I would say, playing devil's advocate, which I love to do, is at no point during the video, I was listening on studio monitors, so it wasn't through, my iPhone. I was listening on a decent speaker setup. At no point during the video did I think any of the overdrives sounded bad. I was never like, they sound the same, but they sound terrible. I was never thinking that. At every point, I was like, yep, that's a usable sound. Sounds pretty good. Not saying that they were at their optimal or that they couldn't have sounded better, but I think all of the examples that he gave were usable sounds, and I didn't tilt my head thinking like, what are you doing?
Absolutely. I agree with
playing
that.
both sides of the fence, I think yes, they were not in their optimal settings potentially, but they didn't sound bad at the same time.
I would agree with that. And I think, obviously some of that has to do with the player. I think also some of that has to do with the context. They create some cool little grooves that they jam on. And so I don't have any objection to what you've said here. I think another element of this that I think is worth mentioning is, and we mentioned a little bit earlier, is to what degree would substituting a Bad Monkey for any variety of other mid-range sort of Tube Screamer-esque style pedals in that same position would yield similar results. And I think based on the findings of this video or in some of the sort of overarching sort of ahas, that presumably there would be a lot of different effects that could go into this as sort of the static control that then you could cycle through other classic overdrives and you could get similar results with some time to manipulate the settings to sound similar. Would you agree with that as a sort of a consequential finding of the video?
100%. I think if you did a blind A/B test, and if you guys are listening, do this at home with a buddy or do it with someone, another guitar player. But take any two mid-gain overdrives and just, instead of seeing, like, do they sound the same, find a, middle of the road setting on one of them. And instead, can I make this other overdrive sound similar to this one? Chances are the answer is going to be yes. Like, you're going to be able to tweak the settings and get pretty close. And so I think even if you look at the test that JHS did and you reverse it, let's say now instead of the Bad Monkey, you swap in the TS10. And now you compare the TS10 to all of those other overdrives, you're going to be able to get them all to sound pretty similar. And you can do the same with the Klon. Like, of course, the Klon is worth $8,000 because it can sound like all of these overdrives. Or the Zen Drive. It can sound like you can reverse the test. Yeah. And there may be variations slightly, but for the most part, we now know from this video, in this context, with that gear, with that player, that these overdrives can all sound very similar, Bad Monkey included. And I think you could take just about any other overdrive. One of my favorite overdrives being something like a Bondi Effects Sick As, has bass and treble. It's based on a clon, volume and gain. Super, very powerful EQ stack in it. It could sound like a whole range of other overdrives. Does that make it better than the Bad Monkey? Not necessarily. Bad Monkey, 3 weeks ago was still a $59 pedal, and the Sick As is not. And so I think I think the test is kind of pointing towards the Bad Monkey, but I think in reality we should say it's pointing towards overdrives in general, and that you could run this with a large number of overdrives and get the same or very similar results.
Yeah. I think that is one of the findings, and that's not necessarily mentioned in the video, but I think is sort of a takeaway that is pretty well teed up for anybody who is looking at the video with some amount of objectivity. I think one of the other things, and there's been a sort of a slew of videos lately in the last, 6 or 8 months that I think have done a good job in sort of representing similar things. There's another guy on YouTube, I don't know if you've heard of him, his name is Jim Lill, and he's done some really interesting sort of tone videos that are more of in a series sequence, but sort of has similar outcomes where he'll look at the idea of tone woods and ends up doing all these A/B recording tests where he compares his prized Tom Anderson to this parts guitar, and he slowly migrates it to having everything different except for the pickups being the same and being able to get it to sound the same, or actually goes as far as to just mount pickups in like a shop bench and
a buddy told me about this.
Yeah, and string guitar strings across it, and is able to get very similar tones. And then he goes in a future episode and does it with amplifiers and basically refines it to a fish, tackle box that has various pedals and some breadboarded EQ circuits that, can sound like a Vox, a Fender, or a Marshall.
Oh, man.
And so, and the A/B tests are convincing. Just as these are, but I think the one thing that is needed, and I'm not volunteering, but is needed, is in any sort of scientific, in the scientific method or in peer reviews or things like that are done that are doing comparisons like this or studying things and propose an outcome. That typically the way that it's best tested is that your peers can replicate the same results, so that somebody else can follow the same protocol, can use the same pedals, and are able to do a recording that produce the same findings that your video produced, as a way to say it wasn't just the conditions of the JHS video or the Jim Lill video that produced these results, that anybody following that same protocol is going to be able to come out with similar results. And that's one thing that we don't have. Because to my knowledge, there hasn't been anybody that's tried to reproduce, what Jim or Josh has done here to say, we also have found that these are the same. And that's not to say that there was any trickery that was going on in Josh's video. I don't believe that to be true. Or that there was some, audio EQ editing. I don't believe that to be true either. But I think that the best way to prove it is to actually, again, do it yourself. Or even if you're considering tossing out every overdrive for a Bad Monkey, maybe go buy one of Josh's switch boxes and buy the Bad Monkey. I think you should be able to, the prices should come down on it. And maybe there's some people on Craigslist or eBay or that don't know that there's been this video and aren't jacking up their prices on it. And you can start to compare, as Grant suggested, with stuff that you already have that's in the same category. Again, I don't think Josh is saying that you can represent a Shredmaster Marshall with a bad monkey, or at least not optimally, because again, they seem to refine the choices to stuff that was sort of in the same rough food group of overdrive pedal. They didn't go with a huge diversity of pedal as it relates to distortion, because you wouldn't be able, I don't think you'd be able to do that. You can't, you couldn't get a rat sound to be like this. Or at least if you did, it would be very suboptimal in terms of the way that you had to set the pedals respectively to get those sounds out of them. What do you think about that, Grant? As far as I
think it would be interesting to, because I don't know about you, Mason, but I've never come across one overdrive that can do it all. And if you're not careful, you could look at the Bad Monkey and be like, it does everything. You know, it covers all the bases, which even something like Preamp MK2, the Automaton or Automaton by Chase Bliss, is set to be a pedal that can do everything. And it can't. It just can't do everything as well as the individual pedals it's trying to replicate. It's a great pedal, but it's not magic. And the green monkey, the Bad Monkey, is the same thing. It's not some magical, mythical overdrive, although it may seem like it at the moment. A lot of other overdrives, like we're saying, can most likely do the same thing. They just haven't, had the spotlight shone on them like the Bad Monkey currently does. And so I think a much better test, if you were considering to get a Bad Monkey or some highly priced and prized overdrive, is to take your current favorites on your board. Maybe you have an RC Booster, TS9, and some other overdrive, and find the sweet spots on those pedals and see if something like the Bad Monkey or this new boutique shiny overdrive pedal can replicate those sounds. And chances are it won't be able to do as good of a job. Yeah. And I think that's more of a realistic test to see if the overdrive truly is magical. And I would bet that it is not, and it can't do those optimal settings on your current favorite overdrive sounds.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that, and I think one thing that this video provoked, for me at least, is the real need for players to be doing real, honest listening tests with the stuff that they have. And maybe the real provocation here is not to go out and buy a Bad Monkey. It's looking at the things that you have, the way that you use them, and are they producing the results that you want? And again, listening with your ears and not with your eyes. There is a lot of mythology that works its way into our brains and makes us believe things about products that are just not true, or that not even the product claims to do, but the influence of our peers and people that write on forums or say something is so great or has a marketing around it that produces a lot of allure for whatever it is. Those can be valid, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get what you need out of the things that you may already have on your shelf. And to a large degree, I try to maintain that in the choices that I make on my own pedal board, is I try not to use anything that is newer than a year old, at least, or older. Because I think that then it sort of removes the recency bias or the hype that can often, catapult something to the front of the line. And if it doesn't have staying power, then it doesn't end up staying there. And a lot of people, I think, end up doing this musical chairs thing on their pedal board because they're constantly responding to the newest, greatest thing. Like, what if we all waited? We just had the discipline to say, no matter what comes out, I'm going to wait a year before I buy it. Because if it's still as hot and as talked about as it was when it first came out or when it was previewed, then maybe there is something to this thing, and that it's worthwhile, at least for me to try. I think that we would see a lot less frustration of guitar players if they had that discipline where it's just said, we're not going to get this thing till it's been out a year, and we're going to wait until all of the barrage of marketing videos and the cascaded YouTuber videos that come out back to back to back to back on the release day, we're going to see what happens, when if it can be sustained over a year. And so I encourage anybody, I don't always follow that advice, but I try to follow that advice for my own rig. And I'm just kind of looking back at what I have. I don't think I have anything. I don't think I have anything that new. So
that's good self-restraint, Mason. I actually,
and not saying it's vintage. I do have one. I think we have one vintage pedal on there, which is a Tube Screamer, a TS9 from the 80s.
But not
everything else in there
release.
is maybe a couple years old.
Yeah, I fell into this trap yesterday, which I want to tell you guys about after I tell you guys about a few of our sponsors. Which is you see what I did there?
Good one.
The first one is creationmusiccompany.com. Creation, myself and Brian especially, because we do a lot of builds, pedalboard builds. We love Creation. Cases, trays, the mini cakes they have. Also, they sell a whole bunch of other, plugs and cable accessories, all sorts of stuff with Creation. And so they are offering actually a discount if you use this code. Wait for it. Not Creation. Chairmen 15. Chairmen 15 will get you 15% off most of their products. Some exclusions apply, but the majority of the stuff is going to be on for 15%. Check it out. Great stuff. They are also based in the U.S., so they have quick shipping. I use them all the time. Brian always jokes, although he's serious, if he doesn't get 5 or more shipments from them in a week, it's a slow week. And I know from experience they use FedEx, and they get it out the door quick. So Creation Music Company, Chairman 15 is the coupon code. The other one that all three of us love on Chairman is monocreators.com. Mono do a whole range of backpacks. Again, Brian has, I think, just about every backpack they offer for video gear, or whether it's guitar gear, transferring his cables, and probably
he puts his kids in a mono bag.
I was going to say like milk bottles for his kids and nappies and diapers, all that stuff. But also the double gig bag. If you want to bring a couple different guitars to a gig, you can bring them in a very durable soft bag that actually protects your guitars really well.
Somewhere.
Yeah, there's one right in the back there. And then I love their pedal boards because it's an angled style board, super light, very strong, and you can fit a whole bunch of stuff underneath the board, which for me is extremely valuable to be able to chuck some, double high junction boxes or power or whatever it may be underneath the board. So check out monocreators.com. Use the code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, for 10% off your order. Lastly, but certainly not leastly, is btpa.com. Besttronics, they are also known as, and they truly are the best. If you need anything for your pedal board, accessories, cable, plugs, if you just need someone to talk to, BTPA, they are
just
the
call
ones.
Brad.
Just call Brad. Brad is he is so helpful, and I like to say this. I've said this on previous episodes when I talk about BTPA. They are small enough to give you personalized service, but big enough to have what you need for your pedal board. So whether it's Neutrik or Canary, Megami, all sorts of different things. If I can't find a part for a pedal board build, I call up Brad. This is what I'm looking for, and sure enough, they have it and they can ship it out next day. So BTPA, use the code DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS, for 10% off your order at btpa.com.
Did you just say that they'll sell you a canary?
A canary, yes. If you're
Brad
going into any
mines,
if you go into any mines or anything like that, you need a canary from BTPA.
Yep.
So
canary in every
Besttronics,
box.
They're great, and they have to ship fast if that's the way they're doing it.
Perishable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love animals. So back to my story. I've been kind of consolidating. You fell
into a trap. Have you been embarrassed about this?
I fell into a trap. As we're chatting, I'm becoming a little bit embarrassed about it because I'm like, okay. I'm very aware as well that I am not,
you're a bad monkey.
I am absolutely a bad monkey.
Yeah.
But I've been consolidating some of the pedals from around our different shops. And so we had a bunch of pedals down in the US. I'm up in Canada. So I've been getting bored, by myself, and I want pedals to play with. So I'm getting some pedals sent up here. One of the ones that showed up was a Klassen KTR, not the old one that's worth $8,000. This one's a little bit more findable. But a buddy came in, saw it on the desk. He's like, "Oh, KTR, those are worth quite a bit." I had no idea. I don't really look for Klassens online. It's not a pedal I'm looking to buy for $8,000 or whatever it is. And so I had no idea. It's like, how much is it worth? It's like, oh, I don't know, maybe about $1,000, $1,100. I think he was talking in Canadian dollars, so $50 American. Either way, it was worth more than I thought. And as soon as he said that, I immediately went from it's a Klassen KTR to I gotta plug that in. This thing's gonna sound great. And it happened in the space as quickly as he could tell me the new price. It became more tonally, not price, because of course it became more valuable because it was worth more than I thought. Tonally, I caught myself thinking it sounds better than what I thought it did 2 minutes ago. And so now we're having this conversation today. This all happened yesterday. Now we're having this conversation today. I'm like, I'm falling into the very same trap. And I'm aware that I do this. I'm not all that surprised, unfortunately. I'm falling into the same trap that we're talking about that is happening currently with the Bad Monkey. And so needless to say, a little bit embarrassed. Glad that hopefully this is still a safe space and you have all found out many times over now that I'm far from perfect and maybe even hypocritical because we're talking about this and the same thing's happening to me with another pedal. So I don't know, Mason, any thoughts on, do you have any lower views of me now that you've heard this story as a fellow chairman? Maybe I need to take some, leave of absence and we don't really talk about why. I'll just disappear for a couple episodes.
Go on a long drive in your Miata and just blow off some steam.
Exactly.
Through the streets, the mean streets of Vancouver.
Man. Vancouver.
No, I think it's a very common phenomenon. I think many of us can empathize with the situation that you're in. And I just, all I can say is that, we all make mistakes and the admission of such mistake is evidentiary that, you're on the road back
I'm on the road to change.
Yeah.
Pop this thing into reverse and get back.
You're on a righteous path, Grant. That's all I can say. I think that invariably we'll all be there. I'm trying to think of like a recent or any sort of recent example of this for me. I guess I got a quad Cortex. That might be the closest I've got to it. But to my credit, I haven't plugged it in yet.
Okay.
I've got it, but I haven't plugged it in. So
I'm very curious about that one, but I think I would go into that a bit biased as well. I have high views of Neural, and so I think I would have to play it for quite a while before I give it a fair review because I think I'd be biased.
I was looking at it more in the context of maybe how I would use an M9, like from line 6 or an HX, as sort of a supplementary piece for maybe more of like the wet processing, although the feedback that I've had from other friends who I trust is that the amp modeling is really its strength and maybe the effects are currently not as strong as maybe a Axe Effects or a line 6 equivalent. So that will remain to be seen. I'm going in with an open mind, and I will try it. But I'm surrounded by sort of great iconic tube amps, and so the bass line is quite high. Yep. And we'll see how. I'm really more interested just to kind of learn the technology because this I think is going to be something that is not going to be going anywhere. I think that we're going to continue to see these sorts of things evolve and are going to make their way into the mainstream. So I think from a pedal manufacturer perspective, or in your case from a rig builder perspective, or Brian's, these are just things that we're going to have to understand and know how to interface with. And I think that there's a level of importance there to understand that this is going to be, here for a while, and people are going to continue to adopt this technology into their rigs or as replacements to amplifiers, or at least in the context of live performance in touring potentially. So in that sense, it's cool. But back to the Bad Monkey, big takeaways, sort of conclusions, things for our listeners to think about, consider, try on their own. I know that there's been already a degree of takeaways, that have been sort of revealed throughout the conversation, but sort of final thoughts and wrap up for those listening. And of course, we would love to hear from you. If you're not already active in our chat, if you're watching this live on YouTube, or those who are commenting later on, we would love to hear about your thoughts on our point of view, our angle on this, any other considerations that maybe we didn't think about. We'd love to hear from you, of course. But Grant, I'm going to turn it over to you. Final thoughts, summary, conclusions. What do you think?
I think overall it was a very enlightening video from JHS. I think it highlighted some flaws that we tend to have as guitar players, showed the importance of the A/B test. Mm-hmm. I think the one thing to remember, or one of the things to remember, is that this was one rig, in air quotes. It was a Telly into a couple of overdrives into a Kemper, mm-hmm. I can assume. And so it was, one amp, let's call it that. Let's be fair to Kemper and call it an amp for the sake of this test. And so who knows what the test is going to do with a Les Paul, an SG, a Gretsch, and I think, so it was one very specific text in one specific context. It was mm-hmm. not by any means well-rounded, and I don't think it ever can be, because that video would be days long. So I think you can only really get little snippets. But I think, honestly, for me, the biggest takeaway was just another reminder, a little like poking and prodding from JHS saying, I just don't buy, price tag does not denote tonal quality. I think, you mentioned build quality in a video. If we keep that aside and we're just saying how it sounds, you can find some really great sounding stuff. Maybe it doesn't look as boutique, and maybe it doesn't look as awesome as something that's 10 times the price. But if you're going for tone, which we all are, you can find some great deals for under $100. And you just have to have the wherewithal to recognize that maybe that can actually sound good. And I'm speaking to myself just as much as anyone else, because I look at a $59 price tag and I pass it by, and obviously I shouldn't be. So yeah, I think it's, if nothing else, this video was a really good reminder to keep our minds open to a whole wide range of pedals out there, and what they may have to offer. There are going to be pedals that just sound terrible. And so don't go trying to make a pedal that sounds like, a can of garbage, saying it's the next holy grail when it doesn't. Like, truly listen with your ears and what you're after, and run some of those A/B tests. And I think you could be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I'm in agreement that I think that the biggest thing for anybody to learn from this is I think, firstly, to keep an open mind, but secondly, that when you are doing these sorts of shootouts, that there are a lot of pedals that could work in a similar space. And, I always think about gain stages. If I'm using a clean amp and I need to sort of be able to have the range of different gain stages that you might find in a channel switching amp or the classic amps that are out there, I think of, sort of lower gain, mid gain, and high gain pedals. And those tend to fall into pretty distinct circuit categories where, a lot of things might sound the same in each of those food groups. And I think that JHS really revealed here that in that context of the mid-gain sort of, mid-range based overdrives, that you can get a lot of different pedals to sound really similar, and you could swap in and out probably a lot of those pedals, as we said, and get very similar results doing the same exact testing procedures. This would be equally true of lower and higher gain stuff, because a lot of the circuits are shared in these or come from a very similar archetype, and they can get fairly similar sounds. And I think that the choices in this are reflective of a specific type of circuit that's maybe more closely related to the Tube Screamer. Not that the Klon is a Tube Screamer clone, it's not, but a lot of those sort of fall into, again, a similar sort of sonic archetype that you would find of that sort of pedal. So I think that those are just things to have consideration for, and I think that, again, listening with our ears and not our eyes is always a wise thing to do. And, again, this is partially why we're having this conversation so far removed from the initial hype of the video and its findings, and then people, again, sort of hijacking the narrative of the video. I think overall the video is really great, and I think it's really cool that it contextualizes some of this stuff and, again, brings some people back down to earth that feel like they will never be satisfied until they've owned, an original Klon Centaur. There are many ways to tone down, infinite paths to finding the right tone, your personal tone, and it doesn't necessarily have to be through excessive spending on really, really high-dollar products. So, any last words before we complete, Grant?
Yeah, I this is going to lead into a whole nother episode, but I would say if you want to change your tone, best thing you can do is practice guitar. Tone is going to start in your fingers, and so instead of buying another pedal, buy a lesson with someone that's awesome. And you
get a lesson, or I saw advertised on Facebook the Django glove, which contorts your fingers to be the way that Django Reinhardt's fingers became, I believe, deformed after he was the victim of a burn in a fire. And so you wear this, look like canvas glove, and it contorts your fingers in such a way where you're forced to play as the gypsy jazz legend did. So that would also change your tone. So gives you forces you into something totally different.
Exactly. So what great thoughts to leave you with today.
Yes. Well, until next time, folks, thank you for listening. And again, if you want to support us, leaving a review on iTunes is the best way possible. And we leave links to that in our show notes and in the description on YouTube, so you can find it there. And tell us what you think. Of course, we would love a 5-star review, but we just want an honest review more than anything. So however many stars we've earned, give us those many stars. And thank you again for listening. We will see you next time on the road to Tone Town.
Adios.